Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a screencast thematic presentation and recording for the part of the lesson that has us looking at feudal Japan. Before we get started, please let me encourage you to open up to today's lesson and to scroll down the correct section and get ready to fill in the content for the missing blanks. Fill in the blanks accordingly based off of the presentation. Remember that you can replay any part of this presentation for detailed clarity or repetition later on. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the story of feudal Japan. Consider this, please. What were the characteristics and causes of Japanese feudalism? If you remember what feudalism is, of course it's an advanced socio-political and governmental system set up in medieval worldly societies. Part 1. Early development of Japan. Let's take a look at geography. As you can see here by this map and by this page, Japan is located over here to the eastern part of China. Japan is part of the continent of Asia, and Japan is a series of islands near the coasts of Korea and China. Similar to Greece, Japan was divided by mountains and had few areas for farming. Before the year 400 CE, Japan was not a unified nation, but was actually ruled by hundreds of different family clans. These clans often fought each other for supremacy and often engaged with each other in some form of early primitive trade and/or warfare. In terms of geography, Japan's island location provided protection from potential Chinese and Mongol invasions, which we learned about in the last unit. But Japan was close enough to borrow cultural ideas from China. As you're aware, the phenomenon of cultural diffusion allows for the transfer of cultural ideals from one place to another. Now, Japan's isolation gave rise to a unique set of cultural traditions and customs. This culture in particular produced something called the Shinto religion. So, Shinto is a polytheistic religion based on the respect of nature and ancestral worship. You might see many Shinto shrines if you went to Japan today. Shinto shrines can take a variety of different forms, giving honor and praise to nature, environmental surroundings, and even ancestors. Now, Shinto worshippers believe in divine spirits, called kami, that live in nature. They build shrines devoted to nature called torii. This is one of the most iconic shrines in all of Japan. Here's another. And here's another. The Japanese have a closely, tightly knitted relationship with the environmental surroundings of the beautiful Japanese landscape. The most important of the Shinto gods is the sun goddess who gave light to the world. As depicted here, Amaterasu, the sun goddess, as beautifully depicted in art form as what might have been in real life and real world, is revered by many the Japanese. As Japan had more contact with Asia, it adopted Chinese culture and ideas. Some ideas were adopted successfully, and others were not. For example, the introduction to Buddhism in the year 552 caused a differentiating relationship with religion and philosophy. The Chinese writings and arts and governmental styles from the years of 500 to 800 caused a different way of looking at government and society in Japan exclusively. For example, Japan tried but failed to model the Chinese examination system for government officials. If you remember, we talked about this in the form of civil service examinations. But when Japan adopted the Chinese idea of an emperor and ruled by dynasties, the first Japanese emperor was said to have descended from the sun goddess. Once again, this kind of goes back to the theme of mandate of heaven. Unlike China, however, Japanese emperors often did not have ultimate power over the various clan leaders. So Japan often had an emperor figurehead who served more as a, shall we say, symbol of power, and clan rulers with true power. It wouldn't be until later when emperors would take on different roles for different reasons. Japan adopted Confucianism and blended Chinese styles of writing, architecture, and art. Sometimes we can take a look at this and identify differences, though, between Japanese and Chinese influences. For example, can you tell which one is Chinese and which one is Japanese? Chinese writing is depicted on the left. Japanese writing is depicted on the right. The same thing could be said true with art forms. Japanese landscape art is depicted up here at the top, and Chinese landscape art is depicted here to the left. Let's try out architectural styles. Japanese architecture is depicted up here at the top, and Chinese architecture is depicted over here to the right. In the mid-700s, Buddhism was introduced in Japan, spreading from China. Buddhism was accepted by Japanese emperors, but in common Japanese society, the two religions, Buddhism and Shinto, did in fact blend. This combination of Buddhism and Shinto is an excellent example of religious syncretism, the mixing of religious beliefs. Now, this new religion was called Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhists take on different traditions and cultural customs than, say, people who worship Mahayana Buddhism, which you learned about in the last unit. Let's go ahead and talk about classical Japan during the Heian period. From the year 794 CE to the year 1185 CE, Japan entered a classical era during the Heian period. During this time, the imperial government was actually strong, and Japan experienced an era of peace and prosperity. Some historians might note that this is Japan's golden age. As it was with numerous other societies during times of peace and stability, Japan developed a golden age in poetry, the arts, literature, and more. The iconic tale of Genji was also written during this period. Part 2. Japanese Feudalism. Please proceed to the next part of the presentation.